My palate is not an organ, it is a scalpel. For 20 years, I have wielded it to dissect the culinary world, flaying ambition from execution, pretension from genius. My name is Julian Blackwood, and my words, printed in the gloss of global magazines and the stark pixels of influential blogs, have built empires and leveled dynasties of chefs. I have tasted night-singing thrush in silken broths in Kyoto and sun-dried Martian tomatoes cultivated in the Atacama Desert. I have sipped wines born from vines that predate nations. And I had grown profoundly, crushingly bored. The restaurant in front of me was a 3-Michelin-star Titan. The dish was pan-seared scallops with a deconstructed bergamot foam and saffron dust, an exercise in technical perfection and emotional sterility. I took a bite. The scallop, flawlessly cooked, tasted of mild seawater and technique. The foam was a citrus whisper, the saffron a gilded apology for a lack of true flavor. In my mind, the review was already writing itself. Chef Dubois, I would begin, has achieved the impossible. He has made a $50 scallop taste of absolutely nothing at all. Each component is a ghost at a banquet, perfectly presented and utterly without substance. They have not been cooked, they have been curated into oblivion. I pushed the plate away, a familiar sigh of disappointment settling in my chest. Another peak scaled, another empty summit. The world, it seemed, had run out of flavors for me. That changed a week later. There was no email, no call, just a courier, a man so still and silent he seemed carved from shadow, who appeared at my penthouse door. He handed me a single, slim rectangle and vanished before I could even form a question. It was a business card, heavy stock, the color of a starless night sky. But the texture, that was the thing. It felt like compressed velvet, absorbing the light and the warmth from my fingers. Embossed on it in deep crimson lettering were just 2 words, the Velvet Eatery. Below it, an address to a forgotten industrial street by the old docks, and a single date for 2 nights hence. No phone number, no website. I'd heard whispers, of course, fleeting, feverish rumors in the highest echelons of the gastronomic world. A restaurant that was more myth than establishment. A chef who was a ghost. They said the food was not just food. They said it was an experience that rewired you. My colleagues who mentioned it did so in hushed, almost fearful tones, as if speaking of a secret society. My boredom evaporated, replaced by the hot, thrilling spark of professional pride. This was it, the final frontier, the one place I hadn't been, the one secret I hadn't cracked. The taxi driver looked at me twice when I gave him the address. The street was a canyon of derelict warehouses, their windows like vacant eyes. He left quickly, his tires squealing on the grimy pavement. There was no sign, just a single unmarked door of lacquered black oak. As my hand touched the heavy iron handle, the door swung silently inward. The change was immediate and absolute. Outside was the cacophony of the city, the distant sirens, the hum of neglect. Inside was silence, a deep, profound, deadened quiet that was both unnerving and profoundly intimate. The walls, the floors, the high-arched ceilings, all were draped in the same crimson velvet as the card. It drank the sound. My footsteps made no noise. My breath seemed to vanish the moment it left my lips. A man emerged from the gloom. He was tall, gaunt, with a face of sharp, pleasant angles, and eyes so dark they seemed to be miniature voids. He wore a chef's jacket, tailored and black as his eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," he said. His voice was calm, a melodic baritone that carried in the dead air. "It is an honor. I am Chef Antoine Moreau." "The honor is mine, Chef," I replied, my voice sounding strangely loud to my own ears. "You've cultivated quite a reputation." A faint knowing smile touched his lips. "I am not interested in reputation. I am interested in truth. Flavor is not a matter of taste. It is an emotional absolute. Tonight, I hope to serve you a sliver of that truth." I was led to a small table, one of only a half dozen in the cavernous space. The other patrons were a study of intensity. An aging billionaire sat alone, his eyes closed as if in prayer. A famous actress, known for her ice queen demeanor, wept silently into her napkin. They weren't eating, they were communing. There was no menu. The meal simply began. The first course arrived, a consommé, served in a simple ceramic bowl. It was clear, with a faint amber hue. I lifted it to my lips, and the world fell away. It was not the taste of chicken or beef or mushroom. It tasted of a coming thunderstorm on a salt marsh, the sharp electric tang of ozone, the deep briny sorrow of the sea, the wet, loamy promise of rain on dry earth. It was a flavor that was also a memory I'd never had. It filled my entire being, vast and wild and melancholy. I drank it all, my hands trembling slightly when I set the bowl down. The next course, Chef Moreau called it pan-seared Elysian heart. It was a small, glistening piece of protein seared to a perfect crust. It looked like no meat I knew. I cut a piece. It was impossibly tender. I put it in my mouth. Bliss, a flavor so complex, so profound it defied language. There was richness, yes, but beneath it, a thrilling, high-wire note of something else, something sharp and wild. It tasted of a frantic chase through a deep forest, the snap of twigs underfoot, the pounding of a heart in a chest cavity. It was the flavor of panic, a beautiful, exquisite, crystallized panic. I devoured it. I didn't analyze, I didn't deconstruct, I just consumed. The dessert was a shard of something that looked like black ice, resting on a bed of what Moreau called sweetened nightshade. The cold was so intense it was almost painful, followed by a sweetness so pure, so achingly perfect, it felt like a final beautiful surrender. But as the sweetness faded, a strange aftertaste bloomed on the back of my tongue. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't sour, it was cold, a thin metallic tang, like a ghost of old blood. When I finally stood to leave, my mind was a chorus of superlatives. This was not just a meal, it was a revelation. Moreau hadn't just cooked for me, he had unlocked something within me. He walked me to the door, his dark eyes seeming to see straight through my skull. "I trust the truth was to your palate," he asked softly. "Chef," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It was beyond words." He simply nodded. "The truth is often is." I stepped out into the night, my head spinning with the future review I would write, a review that would be my masterpiece. But as I walked towards the distant lights of the main thoroughfare, a profound and chilling unease settled over me. The aftertaste was still there, not a flavor, a feeling. It was the feeling of a final, desperate gasp for air. That night, the nightmares started. They weren't my nightmares, I know this. They did not feel like products of my own subconscious. They felt like memories. alien, invasive memories. I am running. My bare feet bleed on sharp rocks in a moonless forest. Behind me, a sound I cannot place, not an animal, not a machine, but something that moves with a rhythmic, unhurried dread. The trees are a cage. Panic is a hot liquid in my throat. I know with an absolute and primal certainty that I am not just being chased, I am being hunted. I see it clearing ahead, a flicker of hope that dies as a shadow detaches itself from the trees. I don't see its face. I only see a glint of polished steel. And then I woke up, tangled in my 1,000 thread count sheets, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My pajamas were soaked in sweat, and I was hungry. Not the usual peckishness of waking. This was a gnawing, hollow, ravenous hunger. An abyss had opened in my stomach. I stumbled to my state-of-the-art kitchen, my sanctuary of stainless steel and controlled flavor. I pulled out artisanal cheese, cured Iberian ham, fresh sourdough. I ate and I ate and I ate, and it tasted of nothing. It was all ash and cardboard in my mouth. The hunger remained, a gnawing, scraping void that the food could not fill. The next night, the dream was different. I am in a small, dark space. The air is thick, stale. I'm bound. I cannot move, cannot scream. I can hear soft, melodic humming from just outside my confined space. A sound that should be comforting but is filled with a terrible, patient menace. The humming stops. A lock clicks. A thin sliver of light appears, and with it, a silhouette. The fear is so pure, so total, it becomes a physical force, crushing my lungs, stopping my heart. I woke up screaming, and the hunger was worse. It was a living thing inside me, a parasite with sharp teeth. My life began to unravel. During the day, I was haunted. The memory of the food at the Velvet Eatery became an obsession. I could taste it, smell it, feel it on my tongue. All other food was a pale imitation, a bland insult. I tried to write the review, my magnum opus, but the words felt hollow. How do you describe the taste of fear, the flavor of a final breath? My senses began to change. Walking through the city, I could smell things I never had before. The faint, sour scent of anxiety from a man late for a meeting. The coppery tang of a paper cut on a woman's finger. I could hear the frantic, hummingbird quick heartbeat of a pigeon on a windowsill 3 floors below. The world, once a muted palate, was now a screaming, raw symphony of sensory input, and it was all filtered through the gnawing, ever-present hunger. I lost weight. My cheekbones sharpened. My eyes, when I dared to look in the mirror, seemed darker, more intense, more watchful. I lasted 2 weeks before I broke. I couldn't write the review. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep without visiting someone else's final, terrified moments. I needed to go back. I wasn't a critic anymore. I was an addict, and I needed a fix. I pulled every string I had. I called in favors that cost me a fortune in social capital. Finally, I secured another reservation. Returning to that silent, velvet-draped room was like coming home. The deadened quiet was a balm on my frayed nerves. Chef Moreau greeted me with that same unnerving smile. "Ah, Mr. Blackwood, you have returned. I see the truth has taken root. Your palate is now awakening." This time, I didn't savor the meal. I didn't analyze it. I fell upon it like a starving wolf, a gelatinous cube that tasted of claustrophobia and the metallic reek of a sealed room, a delicate fillet of something pale that pulsed with the flavor of utter despair. I devoured every last scrap, every last drop of crystallized emotion. The relief was immediate and total. The hunger receded. The world felt right again. I felt powerful. As I ate, I watched the other patrons. I saw them clearly now. The dilated pupils, the focused predatory stillness, the way their gazes would occasionally meet across the room. Not with camaraderie, but with a terrifying, silent understanding. We were not just diners, we were a pack. But the high, this time, was fleeting. It faded in a matter of days. The nightmares returned with a horrifying vengeance, more vivid, more personal. And the hunger, my God, the hunger came back as a ravening beast, more savage than ever. That's when the fear truly set in. This wasn't a culinary experience. It was a chemical change, a transformation, and it was killing me, or changing me into something else. My ego was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate survival instinct. My skills as a critic were useless. I needed my old skills from my forgotten days as an investigative journalist. I started digging. The Velvet Eatery was a ghost. No permits, no health inspections, no tax records. The building was owned by a shell corporation, which was owned by another and another, a dazzling chain that led to a dead-end post office box in a tax haven. The staff, like the courier, were phantoms. No social media, no past employment records. They didn't exist outside that velvet room. Then, I focused on Moreau. Officially, Chef Antoine Moreau was a specter. No culinary school records, no prior restaurants. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. I spent days falling down digital rabbit holes, searching for whispers, rumors, anything. The breakthrough came from the darkest corner of the web, a forum for amateur investigators trying to solve cold cases. I was searching for tangential mentions of elite, secretive dining clubs, and I found a thread. It spoke of a myth, the phantom chef, who would appear in a city for a few months, host ultra-exclusive underground dinners for the mega-rich, and then vanish. Paris, 15 years ago. Hong Kong, 10 years ago. Berlin, 7 years ago. The user had noticed a pattern. In the wake of the phantom chef's stay in each city, several specific types of people went missing. Not the homeless, not the marginalized, but affluent, adventurous individuals. Rock climbers, solo sailors, urban explorers, people who courted adrenaline, people whose lives were saturated with fear. My blood ran cold. I cross-referenced the names. One of them, a woman from the Berlin disappearances named Eleanor Vance, a famous free solo climber, had been mentioned in a small news clipping. Her car was found near a derelict slaughterhouse outside the city. The police report was odd. The place had been scrubbed clean with industrial solvents, but forensic techs noted the presence of complex chemical and distillation apparatus, more befitting a high-tech laboratory than an abattoir. There were no animal remains of any kind found on the premises, only a strange, lingering metallic scent. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. My God. Oh my God. It wasn't cannibalism. It was so much worse. Moreau wasn't eating his victims. He wasn't even using a physical part of them. He was a psychic butcher, a culinary alchemist of the soul. He was harvesting their final, purest emotion. He was capturing, distilling, and infusing the raw, undiluted essence of absolute terror into his food. The ingredient wasn't just exotic spices. The secret ingredient was the soul scream of the dying, the morae as he called it, the fate. I staggered to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The face staring back at me was a stranger's, gaunt, pale, but the eyes were the most horrifying part. They were not my eyes. They were the eyes of a hunter, the sharp, focused, predatory eyes I'd seen on the other patrons. At that moment, my neighbor's cat, a fluffy Persian, darted past my legs, frightened by a car backfiring outside. It cowered under a table, its tiny body trembling. I looked at it, and for one terrifying, crystal-clear moment, I felt no sympathy, no pity. I felt a detached, academic curiosity. A cold part of my brain analyzed the flutter of its heartbeat, the scent of its fear, and a deeper, darker part of me hungered for it. I recoiled from myself, a wave of revulsion so strong that it made me gag. The Velvet Eatery wasn't just a restaurant, it was a farm. And I wasn't just a customer, I was the crop, being cultivated, being fattened, being transformed. I was trapped. I was an addict, my body and mind now hopelessly rewired to crave this profane sustenance. But the last shred of Julian Blackwood, the man who once believed in the art of flavor, was still alive inside me. He was screaming. I could run, disappear, but the hunger would follow me, and eventually it would win. Or I could expose him, risk being called a madman, or being hunted down by Moreau's silent acolytes and their powerful friends. There was only one path that offered a chance, however slim, at redemption. I had to return one last time. I made the call. My voice was steady, betraying none of the chaos inside me. I told Moreau's silent assistant that I had finally understood the chef's art, that I was ready to embrace it. I was granted a reservation for the following evening. I dressed in my finest suit, a walking corpse in bespoke tailoring. Taped to my chest, under my shirt, was a high-fidelity digital recorder. It was a flimsy shield against an abyss, but it was all I had. The Velvet Room was quieter than ever. Moreau was waiting for me. He bypassed my table and gestured for me to follow. "I am glad you have seen the truth, Julian," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "True appreciation requires participation. Come, let me show you my studio." He led me through a hidden door at the back, into his kitchen. It was a nightmare of sterile beauty, gleaming stainless steel, polished copper, vacuum-sealed chambers, and cryogenic freezers hummed with a clean, terrifying efficiency. It was a laboratory, the operating theater of a god of dread. Moreau didn't deny a thing. He showed me his equipment with the pride of a master artist. He called it the psycho-alchemical still. "Emotion is energy, Julian," he explained, running a fond hand over a series of glass tubes filled with a faintly shimmering, colorless vapor. "And the most potent, the purest, the most foundational energy of all sentient life is fear. Not the cheap, common anxiety you smell on the street. No, I mean absolute terror, the final crystalline moment of existence, when the ego dissolves and all that is left is pure, frantic life force clinging to itself. It is the ultimate spice. It elevates a simple meal into a sacrament." He looked at me, his dark eyes glowing with messianic fervor. My patrons consume it, and it changes them. It strips away their dull, civilized layers and awakens the glorious predator within. The final stage of that awakening for my most loyal connoisseurs is to move from consumption to creation, to participate in the harvest. He smiled, a genuine paternal smile that was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. I believe you are ready for the final course, Julian. He led me to a smaller, soundproofed room off the main kitchen. In the center of the room, on a simple steel table, was a silver platter covered by a domed lid. My heart hammered against my ribs, against the recorder taped there. The hunger rose in me, a coiling snake, anticipating a feast. The ultimate dish, he whispered, his voice full of reverence, is not one that is consumed, but is one that is prepared. He lifted the lid. It was not food. It was a man, bound tightly, gagged, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it seemed to suck the very air from the room. I could smell it. I could taste it on the back of my tongue. It was the most intoxicating aroma I had ever encountered. The hunger inside me shrieked with joy. Morrow offered me a knife. It was a work of art, with a handle of polished bone and a blade of dark Damascus steel that seemed to drink the light. He is a financier, Morrow said, his voice a detached whisper. He ruined thousands of lives for profit, a creature of manufactured fear. It is only right he contributes to a purer form of it. Take it, Julian. Complete your education. Become the artist. I looked at the man's eyes. I saw the forest. I saw the locked room. I saw all the nightmares I had lived, and the hunger. The hunger screamed yes. It told me this was my right, my destiny, my power. My hand reached out. My fingers brushed the cold, smooth bone of the handle. The scent of the man's fear was a symphony. The promise of the flavor to come was an ecstasy beyond words. My humanity was a tiny flickering candle in a hurricane. But it was still there. With a scream that was half rage, half agony, I lunged, not at the terrified man on the table, at Moreau. I slammed into him, a move of pure, desperate instinct. We crashed into a steel counter laden with glassware. Vials and beakers shattered, their shimmering contents hissing as they hit the floor. An alarm, high-pitched and frantic, bled to life. Chaos erupted. Moreau, caught off guard, cursed in fluent, venomous French. I didn't fight him. I couldn't win. I scrambled toward the bound man, sawing at his ropes with the beautiful, terrible knife. The ropes fell away. I shoved him toward the kitchen service exit. Run, I screamed. Moreau was recovering, his eyes now burning with a cold, murderous fury. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a thick copper pot, and hurled it at a panel of emergency controls on the wall. There was a shower of sparks, a loud clang, and the fire suppression system roared to life, filling the pristine kitchen with thick, choking foam. In the confusion, I fled. I burst out of the kitchen, through the now panicked velvet dining room, past the stunned predatory faces of the patrons, and out the black oak door into the dirty, real beautiful night. I ran, and did not look back. The story I gave the police was a frantic, rambling mess. They found the restaurant, of course. It was empty, scrub clean, a hollow, velvet-lined shell. My recording was distorted by the alarms in the crash, filled with my own mad-sounding screams. Moreau and his staff had vanished. The man I freed, a disgraced hedge fund manager with many enemies, refused to corroborate my story, claiming he'd been the victim of a simple kidnapping. Julian Blackwood, the king of critics, became a cautionary tale. The man who lost his mind. My career was over, my reputation a ruin. I now live in a small, bare apartment across the country. I write, not for glossy magazines, but for myself, on an old laptop. My final review, a story no one will ever publish, a warning no one will ever heed. I escaped the Velvet Eatery, but I did not escape the change. I am forever broken, a ghost trapped between two worlds. The nightmares are gone, but only because I am now permanently awake. The world is a constant screaming assault of sensory data, and the hunger is always with me. It is a cold, hollow ache in the pit of my being, a constant insatiable craving for a taste I can never again have. I try to eat bread, fruit, meat, but it is all just ash in my mouth. There is only one taste I truly remember, only one spice that feels real. Sometimes, in the depths of the night, when the hunger is a physical pain, I walk the streets. I see the flicker of fear in a stranger's eyes as they hurry past me in the dark. And my mouth waters. I have won nothing. I have only delayed the final course.